Good night, everyone. In this episode of our podcast, we are going to discuss how English operates across its different linguistic layers. Our example is going to be the YouTube Shorts clip by famous content creator, food blogger, and professional chef Nick DiGiovanni. The clip, titled Fortnite Birthday Cake, depicts Nick gifting to an 8-year-old child a birthday cake dedicated to his favorite video game, as well as provided him a celebration of unprecedented scale visited by many of his favorite YouTubers. Let's start by discussing the phonetic structure of the clip. Immediately just after one sentence, we can hear the phrase battling cancer. It is pronounced with an R at the end, signaling erotic kind of pronunciation, and also battling is pronounced with a alveolar sub D instead of the T. Both of those are a typical feature of North American English dialects, as is the use of O instead of O, the backing. The most distinctive feature of connected speech is age dropping, which is predominantly used for phrases involving the form his, such as for his, which is pronounced as for is. It is rarely used for phrases that begin with H words. Another feature is the elision of final unstressed consonants, especially in ED forms such as backed, which is pronounced as backed. Now, I would argue that this clip can be best divided into three distinct prosodic groups, each having their own baseline pitch and sample. The first one has the lowest pitch and typically the slowest sample because it has the grimmest concept of it, so it's Big Caesar before Nick provided him the cake. The third group, by contrast, is the fastest group. It has continuously rising intonation, it has the fastest sample, it is the most optimistic of them all, and together they are all separated by distinct pauses, with the first one being the smallest pause and the third one extending as long as 5 seconds. The standard pitch pattern used is a staircase pattern with rising intonation at the beginning of each clause and falling at the end. Let's cover Nick's lexical choices. Most of those are, as expected, pretty simple conversational vocabulary, however there are a few peculiarities. Some of them are pretty easy to translate, like phrasal verbs such as team up with instead of collaborate. Others, however, are not so simple. The most obvious of those is the metaphorical phrase knocked off my vocabulary, which simply has no equivalent in Russian. Would you translate it to something like заблокировал календарь? And of course, we cannot forget about the use of conversion to form new verbs, such as the infamous FaceTime from Apple's eponymous messaging app. We FaceTimed cannot be translated to Russian in the same way as we Googled can. In general, in the third part of the text, the vocabulary reflects the high tempo and is in general reflected with stack vocabulary. Regarding the meaning, while at first glance it might be similarly conventional with the denotative meaning of Nikam giving the child who suffers cancer a birthday cake, in practice it increasingly acquires a secondary meaning, implicit meaning over time, that manifests in Nick in some way acting as a harbinger of joy to the child, and it allows Nick to establish a certain credibility among his audience and build up support in that way. Overall, I would argue that it is a rather typical example of a YouTube short with a pretty simple and predictable structure, but still posing some issues with translation because of the use of certain deprecated or very conversational vocabulary, and because of the differences between British and American English accents. When translating short-term videos, it's crucial for us to know that they are meant to drive up engagement, and thus during translation we should act accordingly. We should not try to translate them word by word or otherwise literally, and instead we should aim at preserving their original purpose.